Hello and welcome to another episode of Not the Bitcoin News Show. We're actually streaming here live from the Century City, Los Angeles Bitcoin Meetup, and hopefully everything will work out okay. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I'm going to try to place the microphone as close to the screen as possible, and then I'm going to actually end up sharing the screen so you guys can see the screen instead of me. So let's see if I can figure out how to do such a thing. I'm going to screen share, okay, and we minimize the infinite screening. All right, we're going to go to the presenter mode, full screen. And let's see if we can start here. Wonder if I should. Yeah, let's try. We'll see if the people can hear me with that. All right, let's see if you guys can hear me or not. Testing. Okay. So thanks everybody so much for joining us today. Thanks for coming here. Hopefully the people in the audience can follow along with us here on the stream. Thanks so much, Anders, for setting this up. Really appreciate this. Anders has a lot of these Bitcoin meetups out here before. So this is my first time being here, so I'm really appreciatively thankful for that. So thank you, Anders, for throwing this little shindig together. And of course, thank you to Thomas, the World Crypto Network, for having the World Crypto Network channel that we can stream this to. So thank you for that. And just really happy to be here to be speaking about Bitcoin today. For those that don't know me, my name is Vortex. I go under the pseudonym of Vortex in the Bitcoin community. And my name is actually Jeffrey, but you don't need to know that. So, I do go by Vortex, and I've been talking about Bitcoin now for a couple of years now, since about the fall of 2015. I've had my show on the World Crypto Network talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and we've had a really great time. A lot of great shows, a lot of great panels, and so we hope to keep doing that for some time to come. Today, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about the more intricacies of Bitcoin, because there's a lot of misunderstanding that happens with Bitcoin, and a lot of people are really kind of either completely in the weeds or just maybe not understanding it at all. So I kind of wanted to bridge that gap a little bit here today with this talk. So let me just ask maybe a couple questions to kind of gauge the audience here. So how many people here have actually sent a Bitcoin transaction? All right, almost everybody. Okay, great. So how many of you guys have been here maybe since January of last year? Almost everybody. Okay, great. So you guys got to experience the fun of the user-activated soft fork and the potential splitting of Bitcoin. So there's a lot of fun drama that happened last year. We're going to get into a little bit of that today with this talk. So today we're going to try to figure out if we can find out who actually controls Bitcoin. There's a lot of people that want to know what's backing Bitcoin, who's in control. Is there a central authority or a central party? So I think that today we can hopefully try to answer that. Now, I'm just going to try to move this mic a little bit closer because I know that's going to be hard for the streamers to hear. So hold on.
You can move it closer to that speaker right there, probably.
Yeah, that's true too, actually.
That's what I'm getting from the chat as soon as you went to the mic.
Let's do that.
Good point.
Let's go too close. Let's see if we can do this. Testing. Can the streamers hear me? Let's see if the streamers can hear me. But yeah, that's probably about the best we can do. So let's try to do that. All right. So let's see if we can answer the question of who controls Bitcoin. So what I want to do is just kind of go into the main constituencies, the main parts of Bitcoin that actually make Bitcoin Bitcoin. And so we have a few things up here. So we have the developers, the full nodes, the miners, the wallets, and the exchanges. And I kind of want to go into a little bit of each one's role, so we can maybe dive in and figure out how much power each section has and things like that. So let's go right into it. So the first thing I want everybody to understand is that Bitcoin, everything about Bitcoin is publicly available. So all of the actual code is open source. All of the mining information about the blockchain, the information about the blockchain itself is all available online. So we can have all of these graphs and figure out all of these things about Bitcoin. It's very, very, very transparent. And the reason why it's transparent is because we want to create a system that's completely different from the old systems, right? The old systems are completely centralized, very top-down approach. Bitcoin being born on the internet, we want to create a much more horizontal, flat playing field, so much more people can participate. And the best thing about this publicly auditable stuff is that you can really get this sort of like checks and balance system between all these constituencies. Everybody's essentially got a gun to everybody else's head, and so nobody will pull the trigger. And that's kind of what we're finding out in this system. So it really helps incentivize people to be a good actor in the system itself. So it's really important to understand that everything about Bitcoin is public. There is no secrecy or transparency or things like that. Of course, we'd like to maybe know a little bit more about mining profits, but there are some people that divulge that information. Really, what we can kind of tell right now around the world is that the price to actually mine a Bitcoin is somewhere between $2,000 to $4,000. So that still gives us a pretty good leeway with the price today. I haven't checked it in a while, so it's probably around 7,500 or something like that. But what I want to get into next is kind of the one of the most important parts of Bitcoin, which is the developers. So the developers really have like this main important role, and that is to keep the stability, to keep the maintenance, and to create new features. And really a part of this is making sure that everything is backwards compatible. That's really important for all the developers, for the core process, the core ecosystem, to make sure that the Bitcoins you guys have today will work 10 years from now. We won't have to download any additional software. We want to make sure that we encourage people to hold money within the system so that it can, in fact, act as a store of value. So really important. The developers continuously push out updates and continuously keep the system afloat. So at this point, it's more reliable than any bank. I mean, any banking system. I don't know if you guys have heard, but just a couple of weeks ago in Europe, we've seen an entire banking system go down for a couple of weeks. There, ATMs would work. Nobody could get to their credit cards. That wasn't working either. And so it was a big mess. And so people are kind of like figuring out, okay, we got to have something better. There's got to be something better than these horrible systems that cannot scale to the whole planet. We have billions of people that are still unbanked, billions of people around the world, and even millions of people in the United States here. We still see a lot of people. So we have these operations from the government, like Operation Flashpoint and these other operations that go out and demonize certain select groups of people and cut off their credit cards, cut off their PayPal accounts. And in fact, just recently, a journalist I spoke to on Twitter said that her entire livelihood was coming from her PayPal donations, and she was just recently cut off from PayPal for unknown reasons. So now the only way that she's eating right now is Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is really saving lives across the world. But the important part to understand that I want to go into today is that each one of these parts of the system can sort of be overruled by the other. So with the developers, they can put out source code, right? But you have to run it. You have to choose to run it. They can't force you. A lot of people say the Blockstream core group, or however they like to say, controlling all of Bitcoin. No, that's not the case. What's actually happening is there's a set of developers that create this code that people voluntarily run. So what we find on the network right now is over 95% of the people on the network voluntarily are running the client that is called Bitcoin Core. So the developers can only release source code, but you have to run it. You have to choose to see if you want to run it or not. And so that's a big part. So developers essentially can be overruled by people not running their software. So exchanges, wallets, miners, everybody has to run their software in order for the developers to quote unquote have power. Actually they don't have power, right? The only power they have is the power that we give them. And so they can be pretty much essentially, I use the word vetoed to try to make it more analogous to traditional systems, but essentially it's just all voluntary, all voluntary on the network. The next thing I want to talk about, the next part of Bitcoin is a really important part. This is kind of a part that holds dear to my soul and my heart, because this is where we as a user, as a regular person, as just a person with a computer and an internet connection, can almost not really vote, but perhaps signal what we believe is the real Bitcoin, what we think is actually Bitcoin. And so with this software, you can run the software. It's just a piece of software you can download, anybody can download, run on their computer, and this will validate what you believe to be Bitcoin. So if you are unhappy with central authorities like Coinbase or trying to something like that, or maybe characters like Roger telling you what Bitcoin is that you don't agree with, you can run the version of Bitcoin that you believe is Bitcoin, and that is the full node software. And it's important to understand that the full nodes themselves can only do one main thing. They just have this one important main role, which is to validate the blocks. Miners can only validate blocks, and the miners themselves, we'll get into that in a second, but they can only mine the blocks that the full nodes say are valid. So that's all they can do. Miners have, many people think that miners have all this power, they have all this ability to control Bitcoin in the network, but it's not true. the full nodes can veto their blocks. But of course, again, the miners have to run the software. So maybe you're a miner, you don't like Bitcoin Core, you want to run Bitcoin, you think Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin, so you can mine Bitcoin Cash. Again, it's all this voluntary system, and it's all open and transparent. So really, really important to know that role about full nodes. This really allows the individual person to vote or signal what they believe to be Bitcoin. And you can see I zoom back out here continuously because I want people to understand that this is an ecosystem as a whole. There's not any one player that has maybe more power than the other. It really is kind of this open and voluntary system here. So the next we want to get into thing is miners. And again, important to understand these roles, guys. The role of miner is only one single thing. All they do is they mine valid blocks. They mine the blocks that are determined to be valid by everybody, every individual running their full node software, running what they believe to be Bitcoin. So the miners can only mine what people believe to be Bitcoin. And we saw this. We saw this play out last year with the fork. So we've seen things like the miners say that they have 90% hash power, right? 95% hash power on Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin Unlimited, or something other than Bitcoin Core. And so everybody was very scared, like, oh man, the core's only gonna have 5% of the hashing power, it's over, guys. There's nothing we can do. I mean, you might as well throw in the towel. But what we found is that, in fact, the users rejected this new client that people wanted to run, called, mainly Jeff Garza, that was called at the time BTC1 or Segwit 2x. We didn't want this, so we did not run that software. What ended up happening? Multi-billion-dollar corporations and mining centers folded. They literally said they threw in the towel, that they gave up. There was actually 6 people, just 6 people, that because Bitcoin is supposed to represent the whole world, right? But there was only 6 people representing this particular fork, and these 6 people called off the fork. They actually ended up canceling. So that means that the regular people all across the world rejected the central top-down authority planning and were successful at it. This is game-changing. This has never really been done before. I mean, the closest thing we've kind of had is revolutions where people, take off the heads of the leaders, but we're trying to evolve a little bit past that. And so this is what we found out the best way to do that. And again, we completely overruled these huge corporations that wanted to tell us what Bitcoin is. But with Bitcoin, again, you can run your own software, run your own node, and you can determine what Bitcoin is. But again, just like every other system in Bitcoin, it can be overruled. So miners, again, can choose to run software that maybe you guys don't think is Bitcoin. Maybe they want to mine Bitcoin Cash, and they can do that. There's a myriad of different networks that people can run. So they can kind of be overruled. Like, for example, the miners can choose not to mine blocks that certain exchanges like, or vice versa. And so again, everybody's got a kind of got a gun to everybody else's head at this point. And so I just got a couple more things to go, but you can kind of see how each system can be overruled by the one before. Nobody so far is actually in control yet. We haven't found anybody that's in control yet, because everybody so far can be overruled. So let's try the wallet software. Now this is a big entry into the space, because this is really this represents the user experience for the whole space. Because when a new person comes into Bitcoin and crypto, the first thing they're going to do is download a wallet. The first thing their first interaction with making a transaction is going to be with something we call a wallet, which is just like having your own bank account. It's your own bank account that you can choose to do with what you want. And so we see these wallets out there, these big wallets like Blockchain and BitPay and Coinbase, and we can see that they're choosing to accept more and more other tokens besides Bitcoin. Coinbase just started accepting Bitcoin Cash recently, in a bit of a kind of a controversial thing that happened because they launched it ahead of their roadmap. So there was a bit of insider trading controversy there that might have actually happened. But that's all kind of hearsay. But it's just kind of hilarious how these central companies like Coinbase and Blockchain.info, they think that they can push what Bitcoin is on everybody else. But again, everybody's got a gun to everybody else's head. So they cannot coerce people. They have to win you, or they have to compete for your business. And so we see every single constituency in Bitcoin competing for that business. So just a couple of the main roles, they have to store the funds. They have to be this UX for the whole community. And it's kind of their responsibility to keep up with all of the upgrades, because now we have something like Lightning Network. There's this layer 2 scaling solutions that are coming online, and it's going to be again up to wallets to incorporate this. They can choose to do so or not, but if they did, for example, start to incorporate Lightning, we would have a whole new layer ready to go for application developers, for consumers, for merchants, and things like that. And that's what we're doing right now. We're working on actually building out this infrastructure of Lightning right now. But wallets are going to play a big role. They're going to be the first thing that a user sees. So we have to make sure that we get that right. And Andreas likes to say a lot, that most of the software right now is kind of command line based. It's a little bit hard to use. It's early, so we need user developers, graphic designers and user experience experts. We need you guys in the field. So if you're thinking like, how do I get into Bitcoin? Well, we definitely need a lot of graphic designers. So if you guys can do graphics, please maybe volunteer to some of these wallets or some of these projects, because they are lacking. We are getting better and better, but at this point, I kind of like to say that we're about 1989 or so, maybe 1990, because most of these projects are all command line based, very difficult to set up, require a lot of computer science understanding. You can't quite swipe yet to send a Bitcoin transaction like you can send an email, but that's coming. And it's going to be the wallets that get us to that point as well for the user experience. And again, just like everything else, they can always be overruled because we have to choose to run their wallet software. So we see all these wallets competing for people's eyeballs. We have to choose to run it. Like, for example, one wallet can't control an entire space, even if it got too big, because there'd always be another wallet. There'd always be something better. There'd always be, and if somebody, because somebody might not be happy with the current wallets that are out there, they have the opportunity, because Bitcoin is open, to just go and build their own wallet if they're not happy with what's out there. So that's really cool. That's really important to understand that any one of these spaces here is wide open for people to improve upon and get better at, because this is the early days. I try to remind people over and over again that we are still in the early days. And I won't really stop saying that until probably 2024. Or around 2024, at that point, it'll kind of mostly be halfway, 3/4 over. Because by 2028, that's it. We'll have infrastructure inversion, as Andreas likes to say, just like all telephony now goes over the internet. All financial transactions will go over Bitcoin. So the final part of this is the exchanges. And they play a big part in the ecosystem, onboarding new people, being able to trade their fiat currencies for Bitcoin. But again, this is actually a bit of an interesting aspect, because exchanges, for the most part, like Coinbase, who is essentially just a wallet provider, really, they're not going to be, in my opinion, around for very long, because they're going to be the AOLs of the space. Because once everybody's already onboarded onto crypto, why do I need a Coinbase? Why do I need a place to store my funds if everybody I know already knows how to store their own funds? And why do I need to trade in my dollars if I already am in Bitcoin? So I think that sites like Coinbase are going to be limited, are going to be the AOLs of the crypto generation. And really at one point, one day, will kind of fall off in power and influence. And again, exchanges have to be used. So there are exchanges that are competing with everybody else. If you guys don't like an exchange, you can build one yourself or use a different one. So exchanges aren't in power either. They have a little bit of power, that's about it. They don't control the whole system. Developers, miners, wallets, full nodes, we all have to choose to use a specific exchange. And a quick note on exchanges, this paradigm is really, really shifting, because we're going into like this more age of decentralized exchanges. But that's going to be really, really big. That's something that I've been talking about since last year, late last year specifically, that really 2018, 2019 is going to kind of be the year of the decentralized exchange, because we're sick of all these hacks. We're sick of all of these top-down impositions, like the whole SegWit 2x thing. These types of things can be avoided if most of the parts are decentralized. And wallets, for the most part, are pretty decentralized. Pretty much everything in the system is pretty well decentralized, really, except for exchanges. And why is that? Because they have to touch fiat. They have to touch the traditional system. So anytime you have to touch bases with the traditional system, you're going to have some level of centralization, and that's what we find. But I'm really, really excited about things like BISC that Anders was speaking about earlier. These decentralized exchanges that have no central point of failure, that can't be shut down. Something like BISC is really a glimpse into the future, a glimpse into this market where no one can tell you what to do with your money, a glimpse into the world where you can spend it and trade it at will. This is the future, and we've been having our hand held for some time now with things like money, we've given up our power. It's all voluntary. We pretty much said, hey, government, look, we're clearly not capable of this. We need you guys to take control. And that worked okay for a little while, but then they started some world wars, and we kind of got unhappy with their decision making. So Bitcoin really is like this direct response to the last few hundred years of this central banking cartel, of this central printing, of this central creation, and really in general, government putting their stamps, their stamp of approval on things like marriages and like money and like is a relatively new thing. A couple hundred years ago, this was not the case. The government didn't care if you got married or not. They didn't put their stamp of approval on it. You went to a priest or something like that to get married, right? You didn't care about what the government thought. So this actual paradigm of government putting their stamp on everything is only a short-lived thing. It's really only like 100 years old or so. And I think that it's going to be ending pretty soon. And crypto on the internet and this information age is kind of the final nail in that coffin. So we're going to see how that works. So again, exchanges aren't in control. Wallets aren't in control, miners aren't in control, full nodes aren't in control, and developers aren't in control of Bitcoin. So then who can we actually say is in control of Bitcoin? And before we reveal the answer here, I want to say that there's a lot of people that have done research on this topic, a lot of people much smarter than me, people like Jameson Locke, who was formerly of BitGo, writers like Kyle Torpy, who was one of only a few journalists that I actually trust in the entire space. The people that have written all sorts of articles about who controls Bitcoin. And so I encourage everybody to go and research that, check out these people, check out their accounts. But really, at the end of the day, what we kind of find who's actually in control of Bitcoin is something that we call Nakamoto consensus. This is the consensus mechanism that Bitcoin uses to keep the system afloat, to keep the system going, to keep it balanced. And there's a couple of other tokens that use this as well, like Litecoin. But really, it's played out mostly at scale on Bitcoin. And at the end of the day, it is really you guys are in control of the system. If you don't like a wallet, you can build your own. If you don't like this version of Bitcoin that somebody says is Bitcoin, you can run your own full node software and decide what Bitcoin is for yourself. And so at the end of the day, Nakamoto consensus is just really a fancy word at this point for saying that you guys, the community, the people, are in control, because Bitcoin is the people's money and will be so, hopefully, for the foreseeable future, if you guys want it to be. So thank you so much, and I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you so much. And we're going to be here for a while. As Andrew said, we can take some questions and answers from anybody in the audience if you guys want. If you guys have any questions.
So how do you explain the transaction fee type? There's all this level of accountability. Saying that the Lightning also that fees down?
Yeah, so the question was, why are the fees so high, and is Lightning Network a response to that? So basically, what we've seen in Bitcoin is the level of fees were rising with the amount of value that Bitcoin was. So the Bitcoin network itself, in my opinion, was kind of getting, for the most part, there's a couple of things, but it was getting spammed by bad actors. So that was a big part of it. But a really, really even bigger part than that was that the ecosystem itself wasn't ready yet. People weren't batching transactions yet. SegWit wasn't ready yet, or people weren't activating SegWit yet. So what we saw is that this immature kind of space that wasn't ready for this influx of $20,000 of people, wasn't ready for this influx of people, came on the network. And so what that did is it did slow it down. So it did slow it down a little bit, and it did create these high transaction fees. But we've learned from that and fixed that. So Lightning Network has actually been around for years. So the idea of the Lightning Network, it's been around for years. It's been in development for a couple of years, and they just launched a mainnet just recently, a couple months ago. So it's very new, but it's growing like crazy. So Lightning isn't a direct response to those fees. It was an inevitability of scaling a blockchain, because even Satoshi knew you cannot scale a blockchain globally. I mean, he helped invent payment channels, and then a couple of people, Matt Corallo and Mike Hearn, well, mostly Matt Corallo, kind of brought it to life. They actually wrote it up and did the code, and now we have like Lightning Labs and other teams, well, I think at least 3 teams, all working on Lightning to make this a reality, to make sure that the next time we have a huge influx of people, the ecosystem is ready. Because it wasn't just Bitcoin. Remember, the Bitcoin survived. Bitcoin was okay. It was just expensive to use, right? But what happened to the exchanges? What happened to all the central parties of the system? They all went down. they experienced huge loads. They either went down or could no longer accept new customers. There are still people right now from last year still waiting to get approved for certain exchanges. So that was kind of how this huge, that's kind of how that snowballed into this thing that was these huge transactions and things like that. But now with batching, we have everybody's batching their transactions, which means essentially just taking all your transactions for the day and sending them all at once in one transaction at the end of the day. So you're not just constantly sending transactions back and forth. And so techniques like that, and then of course with SegWit, now over 40% of the network is going to make sure the next time we come around for a huge influx, because it will be soon, it will happen. We are going to $100,000, and when that happens, a whole bunch of new people are going to come and we're going to be ready. But every time, just like Andreas says, every time, we fail to scale gracefully, right? We scale, but we just don't do it pretty. It doesn't have it all nice and pretty like everybody really would like it, because that's not how the real world is. The real world is full of unpredictability. So that's kind of what we're finding.
Portuguese, do you want to stop the screen share and then shoot the camera at you?
I think I'm going to do that. Let's do that. Let's go like this. Go back to the camera. Oh, yeah. Shoot the camera at you. I think I'm going to do that. Let's do that.
Good.
Yes. Back to the camera. All right. There we go. Now you can see me. Okay, so you had.
We're going to hear a delay on that audio. Probably.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's about a 20-second wait.
There we go. See if I can mute it. Maybe that'll work.
Question on the decentralized exchanges. How are the tokens coins listed? Is that by the community or how does that work?
So the tokens are listed on various exchanges, but it is up to the exchange themselves to list the coin. And actually what we're finding is that all of these tokens are really for the most part, horribly insecure, horribly unsecure. And so recently a couple of these coins have been attacked and it actually affected the exchanges. So what this is going to do is this is going to put the burden on exchanges to make sure that they do their due diligence and their proper research to figure out if this token is going to make my entire exchange get hacked or not. So it is voluntary by the exchanges. At this point, you kind of have to, like most people would say that you have to have a big community behind the coin. You have to have this push. It's not something easy. In the early days, it was very, very easy to get your coin listed. As you know, I mean, people, Poloniex and other exchanges had thousands of these tokens, but it's getting tougher and it will continue to get harder and harder and harder until there's only a few coins left that are actually secure.
So it's still a centralized kind of.
Yeah, because the exchanges, they are centralized for the most part right now. They do have to have this central point because they are touching fiat for the most part.
But like, let's say IDEX, they're all ERC20 tokens. Is it a free-for-all or does it have to go through a
Sure, so
process?
anytime there's a website, there has to be like a central server, right? So anytime there's actually like a place where you can see on the internet, somebody has to control the domain. And so that's what we find is that, for example, IDEX, somebody definitely centrally controls that. There's definitely like a CEO, there's definitely a company making decision process with that. Hopefully with these things like this, though they are run by a small team of people, they can't be shut down because the nature of the system is decentralized. So hopefully we're going to move more towards that type of market.
You had like 6 or 5 kind of pillars of balance power there. Do you see new entrants or new people entering the space that exchanges are probably important?
Right, so specifically centralized exchanges and specifically centralized wallets like Coinbase, I think is not going to be very important in the future. So the question was, I showed the slides of developers, miners, exchanges, all these constituencies on Bitcoin. And the question was, is there going to be any more? And really, time will tell. Bitcoin will continue to evolve and more technology will be added and maybe there will be more constituencies added to the network in the future. But right now, those are the pillars that make Bitcoin Bitcoin. Yeah.
Are you at all worried about what happens in the future when the government can't really tax the people who have monetary sovereignty? I know we're talking about how governments will compete for people in the future potentially, but the government can't tax people. How are they going to pay for things like roads and the police that protect society and that type of thing?
So it's a pretty common question. So the question was, is how are governments supposed to keep roads and schools going right if they can't extract the taxes directly from the people's paychecks, right? Well, so to answer that, we go back in history a little bit. We go back to before 1913, or before we started getting taxed. We find out that, oh, wait a second, we had roads, we had schools, we had a navy, we had army, we had all this stuff because, you know, it wasn't, it was mostly voluntary. People were giving their tax money. There was only a couple of different taxes and people were willing to pay because they saw directly what they got. It was more of a one-to-one. So they really saw, okay, look, if I pay my taxes, we're going to have a bigger military. But now we're at, you know, we're in a whole new age. And in this new age where the government has to put their stamp of approval of everything, they're going to put up this propaganda saying things like, if you don't pay your taxes, if we don't extract 35, 40% of your taxes every single paycheck, the world's going to end. Schools aren't gonna function, the lights aren't gonna work, and everything's gonna go down. But that unfortunately for them is not the truth. That's a bit of a lie. That's not going to happen. When governments, when they do start having problems taking money out of people's paychecks with the taxes, they're going to, like you say, you actually mentioned a little bit, they will simply have to compete in the free market. And they're going to have to compete with currencies like Bitcoin. And at the end of the day, there are services already that are starting to compete with governments, various decentralized services, and some of them actually do things better than the government. Identification systems, things like that, and on and on it's going to go. And with things like Bitcoin, you know, we'll be able to ask the blockchain. Everything will ask the blockchain for validity. We won't need the government central stamp on everything. And again, you need to eat tomorrow. I need to eat tomorrow. My kids need to go to school. Your kids need to go to school. We need to get stuff done. Things will get done. And we will make sure that it gets done with or without a central top-down. Any other questions? Yes. Sure. So the question is, are Bitcoin and blockchain separate kind of things? And it really is, it's interesting because, you know, Bitcoin came out, everybody understood what a blockchain was. It was Bitcoin. Satoshi Nakamoto defined what a blockchain was, and he used terms like proof of work. He said, this is what a blockchain was. But then 2014 came and, or 2013 came, we had a bunch of altcoins. And so they were claiming that they were blockchains as well, claiming that they were better than Bitcoin. And then we had 2014 come out with all of these, just last year with all these ICOs and all these things. And now the blockchain space is really huge. And it's kind of, everybody's talking about blockchain. What is blockchain? I got to know about this blockchain thing. But unfortunately, what this is the result of is all hype. This is the result of central governments not being able to directly profit from Bitcoin immediately or quickly. So they create their own token. They create their own currency. And then they hype it up. And then they go tell their product managers, which then go tell their CEOs. And eventually, you know, somebody does a deal with somebody saying, we do blockchain now because we're partnered with this company. We have no idea what blockchain is or how it works or what we're going to do with it, but we are working with it. And that's the point we are right now. Companies are simply announcing that they're going to use the blockchain, that they're going to interact with it. But really, we're in a hype cycle, just like the dot-com bubble. Eventually, people will realize that the whole blockchain, not Bitcoin movement, is complete crap, is complete lie. They have nothing. Their security is horrible. They're not innovating anything new. There is literally nothing new that they're bringing to the table. So that is going to take some time to realize. So we're going to have to go through a couple of crashes before that happens, similar to the dot-com bubble where we got Amazon and Google and all these other great companies out of it. But a lot of companies had to fail during that time before people realized, what is this internet thing? What can we use it for? Because I got people over here telling me we can use it for virtual reality in 2001. I got people telling me we can do all of these great things, you know, all these things that people imagined that just simply weren't possible until 5, 10 years later. And that's where we are with blockchain. They're just saying blockchain is just everything. It can do everything. But unfortunately, it can't do everything. It really is designed for one main thing, which is the censorship resistance, which is the ability to not have your transactions be censored or stopped or slowed or frozen by any other central authority like a government or a corporation or a nation state or all that stuff. So people will come around, I believe, and they will learn the truth about blockchain, which is that it's mostly hype, and the only blockchain that matters is Bitcoin.
So then where do you stand on like Monero or that?
Yeah. And so the question was, what are my opinions on altcoins like Monero and Zcash and things like that? And so there's a bunch of different tokens out there now that people claim have these use cases, right? That Bitcoin can't do yet. So they're privacy. Privacy is important. So Monero must be important, right? And ICOs are important, so Ethereum must be important, or these various things. But what we find is, again and again, where it matters, the security is lacking. The scalability is lacking. And so, it's these projects are interesting, they're doing interesting things, but at the end of the day, they really are distracting. They really are taking time away from the main goal, the main thing that is Bitcoin, the thing that's going to change the world, the thing that's going to change money as we know it. They are essentially distracting from it. They really, at this point, are acting as inflation on Bitcoin. All of these altcoins and all of these other things taking time away. At the end of the day, people have their opinions. They're saying that, look, they're doing good work that could eventually be moved to Bitcoin, and okay, maybe that might be the case, but there's let me say this, there's huge amounts of work being done with confidential transactions and privacy on Bitcoin. Huge amounts of privacy work being done on Bitcoin. So Monero, okay, kind of cool, but it's more important to work on the Bitcoin. It's more important work for privacy being done on Bitcoin. Then Ethereum, talking about ICOs, well, there are colored coins like Anders was speaking about earlier. There are these projects that are being worked on to bring all of this functionality into Bitcoin. So at the end of the day, I guess my opinion would be that they're mostly a distraction, and people will eventually come over to the internet of money once it really becomes the internet of money. Once everything is connected with Lightning, doing atomic swaps, where you have to be, just like right now with a computer, what good is a computer without it being connected to the internet? Just worthless at some point, basically. That will be basically your blockchain that's not connected to the internet, or that's not connected to Bitcoin. That will be your private centralized token that's not connected to Bitcoin. It essentially will be worthless.
What are some ways that people can run full nodes?
Sure. So the question was, how can we run full nodes? And I do this question a lot because when I on my Twitter account, I try to tell people all the time. I say, run a full node. In this house, we run a full node. I try to stress the importance of it over and over again. But then I get back, well, how do I do it? Tell me how to do this. And there are just huge amounts of information out there on how to do this. I mean, the actual Bitcoin Core website has a tutorial telling you how to do it. There's lots of great videos on YouTube. And at this point, in the information age, people still haven't realized this yet. Naval likes to say that at this point, the internet allows you to do anything you want to do. People just haven't realized it yet. We're still so early. But at the end of the day, man, you search how to run a full node on YouTube or Google or everywhere, and you will find huge amounts of awesome tutorials because it's getting better and better. It's getting easier and easier to use. We're still evolving. We're still the command line prompt, things, but it is getting easier and easier to use. So to run a full node at this point, I would recommend going to either the Bitcoin Core website or searching YouTube, because there's a lot of great tutorials on YouTube these days. And it's increasing like crazy because the space is increasing, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So they're going to find more and more people specializing in this, and eventually it'll be in colleges, and eventually it'll be everywhere, just like the internet is today.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
Okay, so Brett Morrison, who was actually meant to be here today, but unfortunately because of family emergency couldn't come. But he earlier wrote a blog post on not only how to set up a full node, but also set up a Lightning node. So it is, his Twitter tag is @BrettMorrison. If anyone writes to me, I can send back that blog post.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people creating these tutorials, and it's great. It's as this gets more and more important, as the word gets out more and more, thanks to people like yourself talking about Bitcoin and coming to meetups like this to try to learn more. This is where it starts. Is here. I mean, just imagine this as the computer club, in the 1980s with Steve Jobs going to the first meetup, right? They're saying, why does anybody want this? Why does anybody want this computer? Like Steve Jobs says, they just don't know. They want it, they just don't know it yet. I think that's where we are. People want Bitcoin. They need Bitcoin. They just don't know it yet. Right? Yeah, so the question was, when is Lightning going to be done, right? Pretty much, but software development is never finished, right? There's never a final version of Windows. There's never a final version of your operating system on your iPhone. So it's a process, and it's a never-ending process. It's a continuous process where we get better and better and better and increase the security more and more and more. And that's what makes Bitcoin so important and Lightning so important and so big, because so much work, so much time has been put into this by the smartest people in the world. Not ICO people, not get rich people, not altcoin people, but people who are doing this for the science, people who are doing this for what it can actually bring to humanity. So with Lightning, again, a lot of great people working on it, a lot of great developers. My personal opinion is, at this point, and nobody knows the future, of course, but my guess is at this point, we're looking at full ecosystem-wide integration of Lightning by the end of next year. We're talking about every single major exchange, every single wallet, all by the end of next year. And you might think that's pretty fast. That's too fast. But in Lightning, in Bitcoin, everything moves fast. In crypto, everything moves 10 times faster than any other market ever. And so by the end of next year, we're talking, and going into 2020, but by the end of next year, Lightning will be everywhere.
And I think you can buy coffee in Palo Alto with Lightning now.
Oh yes, you can buy coffee in Palo Alto with Lightning. There's a couple different shops that are setting up these merchants, and Blockstream is actually they announced a bunch of these demonstration level applications, and one of them was a point of sales system that I believe a couple of people are taking advantage of in Palo Alto that are taking Lightning for their coffee. So yes, absolutely. As you know, it's a big thing in the Bitcoin space, taking coffee, because there was a couple different proponents of the way that Bitcoin should work. What one group wants us to scale just right now, instantly, to everybody, to onboard the whole planet, everybody on Bitcoin right now. And another group wants to take this more measured approach, like basically how the internet was built, and just build it slowly and surely and securely to make sure that this is the one network that everybody can benefit from, like the internet.
You come from Palo Alto down to here for the meetup?
No, but I was living up in that area for the last 3 years.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's a bit of a way. But yeah, it's actually amazing how fast Lightning is moving. And then sidechains. I mean, sidechains now, that's the big thing. I don't know if you had a question about sidechains, but maybe I can.
What's the status of it?
Sure. So there's a couple of sidechains out there right now, but really the big one, the one that really matters, is coming out from Blockstream called Liquid. This sidechain called Liquid is called Liquid because its main goal is to provide more liquidity to the system itself, between exchanges, between market makers. And this is going to be big because right now, we do these transactions at the end of the day to settle and to save on fees. But what if we could transfer instantly and privately between trusted members? Not Lightning, because Lightning is a different use case. Lightning is for everybody, for the whole onboard the world. What if big, huge partners wanted some type of network where they can 100% guarantee that things are instant and secure, and that they're, for example, not leaked, so that they're private? So this is what Liquid is trying to do, trying to create this network. Now, it's not fully decentralized. It is what we call a federated network, so there's no central point of failure, but they are these trusted federations. And they're all running the sidechain software, but between them, and again, it's open, anybody can run this, they can transfer unlimited amounts of value instantly and privately. And that, I assure you, will bring huge amounts of improvements to the exchanges, bring huge amounts of liquidity into the system. And that's what it's all about, is bringing liquidity into the system. That's what Bitcoin will function. That's Bitcoin's lifeblood, is liquidity. Yes.
So like Bitcoin is an open source repository of code that I can download and run on myself. So is Liquid also a different open source repository?
Yes, I believe Liquid is open source as well. I know it's definitely being created by Blockstream, and there's tons of information you can go out there and check out. But the main developers are Blockstream right now, working on this. And again, it's a product they want to make money on, right? They do want to make a profit on this, because Blockstream, that's what they do. They create these solutions and they create these software programs that they hopefully will make a profit on one day. They don't just work on the open source project that is Bitcoin, because eventually they got to make some capital, and this is one of the ways that they're going to do it.
Well, why aren't altcoins decentralized exchanges?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, functionally, they pretty much are, because with a sidechain, you can have any amount of issuancy. You can have maybe only 10 coins, or maybe you can have 100 million coins. You can do all these different things like you do in altcoins. But the main difference is that it stays within the Bitcoin network, within the Bitcoin ecosystem, backed by the Bitcoin security, backed by the security of the Bitcoin mining network. So what you do is you're like, well, I want to do something with Bitcoin, but there's only 21 million coins, or whatever issue you have with it. I want to change something slightly and make it a little bit different and make this viable. You can do that anytime you want with a sidechain on Bitcoin, and that pegs your tokens 1-to-1 with Bitcoin. So you can have 100 million tokens on your sidechain if you want, but they eventually have to be able to settle to Bitcoin, and that's the power of sidechains, is the ability to use the network of Bitcoin and the security of Bitcoin, while still giving you a bunch of freedom, and ability to do other things.
That's launched and like available today, sidechains or?
So sidechain is a project, an ongoing project that's being developed by various people. There's actually a couple of different sidechain projects that are currently being developed. Another one is drive chains, which is kind of a different take on sidechains. And again, I only follow Bitcoin, and I can barely keep up. You know, people are like, "What do you think about all these other tokens? What do you think about these other things?" And Ethereum, and I'm like, "Look, there is so much happening on Bitcoin, so much that it's all I do is Bitcoin full time, and I can barely keep up." But there are various other people working again on these sidechain projects, on these drive chain projects. Paul Stortz is a person who's working on something like this, working with drive chains. So there are people working out on this. But really, I think the biggest one that's like had the most commercial viability, the most eyeballs that are looking at is probably going to be the Blockstream liquid sidechain, because that's kind of the first proof of concept for sidechains that we can actually point to and say, like, look, we have a sidechain working and it's working and it's amazing. So that's going to be the first one. After that, all sorts of people will be creating sidechains. It's a good first step. Yeah, so Rootstock, that's another example of a sidechain. They're doing some interesting things because what they're trying to do is they're trying to bring the Ethereum programming language over to Bitcoin. And so that's what they're doing with their sidechain. So on their sidechain, because remember, on each sidechain, you can have a whole different consensus mechanism. I mean, you can have different tokens, you can have anything you want. Really, it's the sky's the limit on the sidechain because it won't affect the original Bitcoin network. So we are finding that people are doing crazy things like Rootstock, which is, again, trying to bring the Ethereum programming language into Bitcoin. And whether that will be successful or not remains to be seen. You know, I definitely have some security problems with RSK right now. I have some issues with their security, but I think it could be worked out. And, you know, sidechains, I just know are going to be here to stay in some form, in some variety, because we have to have more flexibility than Bitcoin gives us, but we still want to stay within the Bitcoin ecosystem to make sure we still have that security, to make sure we still have that, basically that backing.
Can you tell us something about simplicity, the language from Blockstream? What's the purpose of it? And apparently it's super simple, like few lines of code, but amazing what it can do. Can you like shed some light?
So the question is about simplicity. And simplicity is really, really exciting. Simplicity, you know, I spoke earlier about how Bitcoin is very simple. That's why maybe sidechains are really cool, really viable, because they allow you to extend Bitcoin in a way. But with simplicity, this is kind of what I call maybe Bitcoin 2.0. This is the next generation of Bitcoin development. What simplicity is a whole new secure scripting language for Bitcoin. And it's not just a scripting language for Bitcoin. It's kind of like Ethereum, where you can do these things like smart contracts. But again, it all is pegged to Bitcoin. It's all within the Bitcoin ecosystem using the Bitcoin security. So simplicity is going to allow developers to program much more complicated applications on Bitcoin, much more complicated smart contracts on Bitcoin, and essentially just kind of simplicity is really the answer to all of these things like Ethereum, EOS, all of these other things that claim they can do so much more than Bitcoin, right? This is kind of the answer. This is Bitcoin's answer, is simplicity to all of these things. And again, very, very early days, very, very early with this right now, still being developed. You know, it's very early, but essentially the reason why it's called simplicity is because it really is only a few different blocks that you can use, a few different options, a few different ways of programming things. When you combine them together, it can create anything you want, and it will be secure. Unlike Ethereum, where you can launch something on the and you have no idea how much gas it's going to take. You have no idea how long it's going to take to process. With simplicity, you know right away. You can actually know how much, for example, gas that it would take. You can see these things right away. You don't need to have these huge inefficiencies that Ethereum brings. So simplicity is a next generation of Bitcoin programming language, and I would expect that to really start taking off again. 2019, 2020, still a couple of years off from that. But very, very exciting stuff. Any more questions today?
Tone right, price going at $1,300.
Is Tone right? That's what the world wants to know. Are you right, Tone? We don't quite know, but personally, my opinion is, even Tone, he even says, because he's getting a lot of flack right now for saying that Bitcoin might go to 1,300. He's getting a lot of flack for that. But even Tone himself gives this a probability of 12%. I mean, it's small probability. So he's got 20% will bounce at 5, 12K, like 10% will bounce at 3K, like 8% or something small that will bounce at 1200. So he's getting a lot of flack for that. But at the end of the day, look, Tone is looking at this like traditional markets, and that's fine. Technical analysis actually works pretty well, but Bitcoin is not a stock. It's not meant for these traditional things. It's a network. And so what does a network do? It just keeps going. If it's successful, it will continue to go up and up and up and expand globally and exponentially until the world no longer needs it or builds it or evolves upon it again. So like with the internet, we had, Bitcoin is the third wave of the internet, like Andreas likes to say. The last wave was like social media. The first wave was the World Wide Web. So we continuously build these new tools as we need them. And yeah, that's where we're at with Bitcoin.
Kind of related to that, is there any relationship between the cost of mining of Bitcoin and like the floor price?
Yeah, so that's a good question, actually, really good question. So the question was, is there a correlation between the price of Bitcoin and the creation of Bitcoin? And that's really important because, Safety wrote a book called The Bitcoin Standard that I recommend everybody check. Everybody needs to buy that book right now, The Bitcoin Standard. And in it, he explains something that's very, very important about Bitcoin, something called the difficulty adjustment. And with this difficulty adjustment, it's really interesting because in every other market, like copper or gold, what happens? You buy, the price of copper goes up, people start manufacturing it, and then it comes down. So if copper is super valuable today, then the market will just go out and mine more and create more of it and bring the price back down. So it can never, expand forever, right? Everything eventually gets measured by the cost of human time because there's only so many hours in a day. But with Bitcoin, we separate the price and the creation with this difficulty adjustment. So that means this. Here's what that means. No matter what the price of Bitcoin is, if it's 100,000 or if it's $1 million or $10 million, the exact same amount of Bitcoin is produced every day. Every single day. That difficulty adjustment will make sure that as the price goes up, it's more difficult to mine. As the more and more people get into mining, the difficulty will go up. So when the price goes up, more people get into Bitcoin mining, difficulty adjustment goes up. Make sure that it becomes more and more difficult to create. So it doesn't get, it's basically the opposite of easy money. It's the opposite. We've never had anything like this with a real ability to separate the price and the creation. We've never had this in the history of man. And that is a big, huge, important thing about what makes Bitcoin sound money, because you simply can't inflate it away. You simply can't print more of it to bring the price down. It is the world's best form of money and the best store of value that we've ever had. Precisely for reasons like the difficulty adjustment.
Along those same lines, do you have anything to add to Andreas Antonopoulos' response to the amount of energy that you use to mine Bitcoin?
Yeah, so the question is about energy mining with Bitcoin. It's a really low-hanging fruit for concern trolls and journalists out there. They're like, if Bitcoin keeps going, we're going to just use the entire planet. Right now, it's using the amount of electricity as a small country. So, oh my God, what happens when people start using Bitcoin? Will we just go into a black hole or something? So it's a pretty big, important question because people need to start asking these questions, and that's what I love about Bitcoin, because it brings out all these great questions. Because when you start asking that question about what happened, why is Bitcoin so expensive to mine, or why is it expensive to mine, you start asking questions like, wait a second, how much does it cost to keep my regular bank open? How much does it cost? Wait, you're telling me that it costs $1.50 to create a penny? Like, you start wondering, that's what the current market is like. The current economics are, it costs more than a penny to print a penny. And you start realizing, wow, all these bank buildings are open 24/7 with air conditioning and built up to the sky. And you start realizing that there is an order of magnitude, several orders of magnitude, more energy being used to keep our traditional financial system open than is needed. Just huge amounts of waste. And Bitcoin, what this does is it not only incentivizes to make it better, which is great, but it already is better, already is more efficient, because again, 32 lines of Python code is essentially replacing central banking. So we're already efficient. And now we're talking about energy efficiency. When we were creating the mining, when we're creating the Bitcoin with mining, it's going to incentivize the world's largest greenness movement, the world's largest green movement. People are going to look back and be like, wow, I didn't know Bitcoin was actually an effort to, completely green the whole planet, the world's biggest green initiative ever. And that's exactly what it is, because again, it creates that incentivization to bring that cost down. And so we're gonna mine Bitcoin in space. We're gonna mine it in the Antarctic. We're gonna mine it wherever the cheapest price is, and that will continue to bring the cost down more, and will continue to create more more efficient ways of making energy, and really, in my opinion, will help lead to this golden age of energy creation, to where we have these independent, like almost energy boxes. You know, we're getting a little sci-fi, but at some point we're going to create this ability for everybody to produce their own energy. We're going to create the ability for everybody to 3D print their own food, to 3D print their own clothes, and it'll be completely all powered by Bitcoin and by these digital currencies, by the internet itself. And we will become more self-sovereign and more self-sufficient than we have ever had in the history of mankind. So I think that as more people learn about Bitcoin, they'll realize that the energy is, in fact, huge amounts of orders of magnitude far more efficient than our current system. But it's right now, it's a low-hanging fruit. People, journalists, like to have a field day with it. Any more questions?
When moon?
When moon? When moon? That's the question I ask every day. No. I think. Current trajectories of Bitcoin, if it is successful, right? We're looking at $100,000 by 2020, $250,000 by 2022, over $500,000 by 2024, and then by 2028, if we're still measuring it in dollars, we will completely have infrastructure inversion at that point. And just like all telephony goes over the internet, all settlement will go over Bitcoin, because there is nothing else better. It is the most efficient and the most trustworthy, and people will realize this over time. Just like people realize that it's far more efficient to use Skype to chat with somebody live than to go visit them. They're going to realize that, oh wow, this is way more efficient to send money via this censorship-resistant system that nobody can shut down or stop instantly, than using PayPal, which charges me all these fees and shuts down my friend's account, things like that. So again, more competing in the open marketplace, more open market competition. This is what Bitcoin brings: truly free markets. And we haven't had free markets in finance and trade for centuries. And this is what Bitcoin is going to bring. And another thing that Bitcoin is going to bring is this real competition, where governments are going to actually have to do work. Law enforcement agencies are going to actually have to do work. They're not going to be able to just look up on, a key score or whatever program Snowden exposed that the three-letter agencies are using. You're going to have to actually do real due diligence, and that's what's important. It's really important for Bitcoin to bring this transparency, to bring this this new way of thinking, to where we stop looking over people's shoulders, we stop asking for help, we stop asking for handouts, and we take the responsibility upon ourselves. And we take responsibility for what we've done in the past, and take responsibility for what we want to do in the future, and really own it. Own the new world that we want to build. Yeah.
What moves do you see the government taking?
So the question was, what moves do I see the government starting to use to maybe thwart Bitcoin or slow its progress? So the government does still have an extremely large amount of power with central banking, right? So they can still do things like shut down bank accounts of exchanges. They can make things difficult with their regulations, and they can do little things to maybe slow Bitcoin a little bit. They can, slow it down a little bit. But at the end of the day, they know the writing's on the wall. They can't stop it. They have to shut down the whole internet. So they can't stop it. So what are they doing? They're working more and more with it. Companies like Coin Center are educating regulators on Bitcoin. People on Wall Street like NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange have announced Bitcoin plans to either do open Bitcoin futures or Bitcoin trading desks or something. And so just people are capitulating and realizing that you can't stop it. Well, okay, we'll try to slow it down a little bit, and then we'll slowly try to take our piece and become a part of it, because there is no other way. Bitcoin is this black hole. It's just going to suck in all value because of its limited amount of coins. There's just nothing that can escape its grip on people, because the main thing that we do with what money is a form of communication. It's a form of storing value from the work that I did today for tomorrow, for generations to come, and that's really important. That's always been important. That always will be important. Gold has been important for thousands and thousands of years, and has survived for thousands and thousands of years. And Bitcoin will do this for the next generation, for the next 1,000 years. So very, very, very important. They can't stop or slow. They can't stop it at all. They can slow it down a little bit, but that's about it. Any other questions?
On a side note,
Yes.
Visa's been down in Europe for the last 6 hours.
Really? Visa's been down in Europe for the past 6 hours. It's ridiculous. I mean, they were just down a couple of weeks ago too. So again, these horrible centralized systems. It's not going to compete with Bitcoin, who has had 99.999% uptime for the last 9 years. Not one single financial institution can claim the amount of uptime that Bitcoin has. Absolutely not. Freaking Visa. But at least they allow us to make Bitcoin debit cards for now. We'll see.
Do you know of any Bitcoin debit cards that will allow a daily limit over $1,000?
Yeah, so in the US, unfortunately, we're really stifled. We only have a couple of choices, BitPay or Coinbase, and that's it. I know that BitPay does have larger limits than Coinbase. Coinbase is pretty small. I think Coinbase is only 2,000 limit. I believe that BitPay is more than that.
Yeah, chip card is what I'm using right now.
Yeah, so that's the Coinbase. Yeah, so they actually do have smaller limits than BitPay. BitPay does actually have larger limits. I think BitPay is kind of high, like might be 5,000 per day. It's at least twice as much as Coinbase.
BitPay, okay.
And I hate recommending them so bad because there's so antithesis to Bitcoin. They're so antithetical to Bitcoin, to its ethos. But that's where we are right now. This early days, we have to have an AOL to onboard everybody. We have to have that AOL to where eventually people will leave the limit card and go out and explore. I think no more questions. I think that's it. Then we think we can end it. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks so much.
Vortex.
Really appreciate it. All right, thanks, guys. We're just gonna end a live stream real quick, and then I think we're gonna head over to the mall for some food or something.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Let's hit the end button. Thanks to everybody on the stream for streaming, for joining in. Hopefully you guys can hear that. We put the microphone next to the speaker. Hopefully you guys can hear that. And otherwise, we'll be much more prepared next time. I need a smaller microphone, but thanks for joining us, guys. Have a good one.
Viewers do you still have?